It's incredible. I mean, we've given away this year alone almost $700,000 to nonprofits. It makes our whole country more prosperous, more safe and secure, and makes our communities more tight knit, and it makes our country better. And that's the thing with American manufacturing. I don't care where it's happening, as long as it's happening in America. American manufacturing means more to this country than I think people know. And if we can continue bringing it back, it's going to make everything better.
I remember, 2, 3, 4 months ago, I think I saw a post that Jessica had made that she's like moving to Montana. I'm like, wait, what is happening? Because she was in Cedar City, which I don't know if you know this, but which is 45 minutes north of where I live.
Oh, really?
And yeah. And I was like, wait, what's happening? And then I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, congrats. That's a good move. But that, to me, just based on the limited amount that I know about her, and we've shot total archery challenges together, and talk shop, but that's a no-brainer, man. That was a good move for both of you guys.
Yeah, no, I needed somebody that I could kind of trust to help me with some of the relationship side. It's actually a challenge. Like probably the hardest challenge I've had with growing MKC isn't about making more knives or about buying equipment. It's like maintaining relationships, when you get so busy, and I know everyone's busy. I hate to make it sound like I'm busier than anybody else, but you get to a point where you do, like, my favorite part of this industry is the people, but it gets to be really, really hard to feel like you're being a good friend or whatever and check in with people, right? Like I don't ever call you, but it doesn't mean, that I feel any different about you or anybody else. It's just trying to help keep up with the relationship side. And so when I was looking for a kind of a brand relations manager, I was looking for somebody to kind of amplify my voice and help take care of our people, friends and friends of the brand, and make sure people are taken care of and that they don't feel like they're left behind or, whatever. So, and also then develop new relationships. So, she's been phenomenal. So when we found her, she's respected throughout the industry. She knows a ton of people.
No doubt.
And then she's just a sweet person. I hope her headphones are in because they actually are in. So she can't.
Oh, is she right there? Tell her I said hello if she's right there.
she won't hear me. She's got her noise cancellings in. We actually share an office now. It got to the point in this building where we're just so jammed up. So I moved her over into the corner of my office, but we both wear these noise canceling headphones. And when you got them in, it's like you're in La La Land. So I could talk all kinds of crap about her. I actually don't want her to hear me say anything good about her. So I'm glad she's got them in.
Yeah, you don't want her get her head to get too big and then think that she, deserves a raise or something like that.
Yeah, but, no, she's not going to get one of those. That's for sure. So yeah, she can't hear anything I say.
And she also, to brag on her a little bit, she is a straight up assassin too. I'm sure but she's an incredible hunter. I've never hunted with her or a husband, but I've shot Total Archery Challenge with them, and they are both phenomenal hunters.
Yeah, it's funny when they moved here, they're actually renting I have a house next door. They're renting that from me actually. And Braxton was out. She was actually out of town. Braxton showed up with their enclosed trailer and he had it all unloaded out in the driveway. And I told him I'd help him unload like washer, dryer, heavy stuff. Right. And I went over there and there's like 8 elk racks and all these big whitetails and muleys. There was all these racks spread out in the driveway. And I was like, damn, dude, like you're a killer. And he goes, oh no, those are all Jess's.
Of course they are.
I was like, holy shit.
Of course they are.
That's wild. Of course, Braxton's gotten his own fair share of animals too, so he's a hell of a guide. So they're both killers for sure.
What's with the mule deer behind you over your shoulder there? Is that is there a story behind that?
There actually is. That's when I shot at Big Chino back in 2001.
Oh,
down in Arizona. That was a spot and stock archery.
I've hunted with those guys.
Have you? Yeah. Yeah, with JP and those guys.
JP.
Bert Soren was down there with me. Brandon Lilly, Logan from Black Rifle. There was a bunch of us down there. And
did you say 2001 though, or 2021?
I'm sorry, 2021. 2021.
Okay, I was like, whoa, that goes way back, but time just flies. So, all right.
I know.
2021 makes more sense to me. So I got it. Keep going.
It feels like 2001. So totally. we spotted that buck and day one, and I took off hiking for it. And there you can wear earpieces where they can kind of help walk you in.
You can radio. Sure.
So that buck was a couple miles away. You can't do that in Montana. So that was new to me. So I go hiking off to kind of just cover distance. These deer are up on a hillside. And as I'm working my way up the hillside, those deer got up out of their beds and started feeding. And then those guys radioed me and they were like, hey, those deer are gone. Like they rebed, but we can't see them. So they had no eyes on them. And so I just worked my way up in there without any comms at all. And I just took one step at a time for like 2 hours, glassing with every step. And I ended up finding one of the small bucks bedded underneath one of the trees. And it's kind of one of those, like, you find one buck and then you start, I stayed frozen in that position and I started looking around just in my binocular, field of view. And all of a sudden it's like, there's another buck. And I was 38 yards from all of them. And they were all bedded there. They didn't know I was there. I stayed frozen there for probably 40 minutes. I didn't move a muscle, other than I put my binos back as slow as possible and grabbed my release and was able to click it on my bow. I already had an arrow nock, thank God. And I just waited. And finally, all of a sudden, they just decided to stand up. And I had ranged the tree that big buck was laying under, because I couldn't range him. He was down in the grass. You could barely see him. And I just ranged the tree he was under. And so when the young buck started standing up, I knew there was a lot of commotion. So I took that as my chance to draw. And I drew. And as soon as he stood to his feet, I shot him. And he went just a little ways and died. But here's what's crazy about this story. I leave him with a taxidermist down there to clean the skull up and whatnot. And he calls me a couple months later and he's like, hey, did you see what was in this deer's face? And I was like, no, what are you talking about? There's a broadhead. And we actually, our t-shirt, our mule deer t-shirt kind of pays homage to this. There is a shaft of an arrow and a broadhead through the side of that deer's nose. And the mechanical broadhead is in the tear duct over here. And so when you look up inside the nostril of that deer right there, you can see the arrow shaft going across. I'm trying to point on here, across that deer's nose, and there's bone growing over the shaft of the arrow. So that is really deer,
cool.
At least 2 years, that deer ran around with that arrow busted off in its face, which shows you how tough those animals are.
Well, you'll have to, after the recording, show me the broadhead and the arrow. Maybe it's one of mine. I don't know, because I've never been able to bag a mule deer. I went for 3 years. Man, you were talking about sitting there for 45 minutes. Dude, I sat in a ditch on the Arizona Strip with Big Chino for 3 hours and froze my balls off because I had stalked into a deer. They were working me into it. I stalked into it. The thing stood up. I just hurried and took a shot right over its back. They watched him. They said, hey, follow this dry riverbed. I'm like, okay, fine. So I followed this dry riverbed and they're like, hey, he's just bedded up. You got to sit there until he gets up in the evening. I sat there for 3 hours and he's like, all right, get up. So I got up and I popped up over this ridge and I couldn't see him. He's like, he's to your left. I'm like looking everywhere. I could not even see him. And finally I saw him as he was running away from me. So
really?
I have some good stories with Big Chino. Those are good guys down there. They're all firefighters too, which I love.
It's really tough hunting. Like, it's funny because I shot that deer on day one. And then I started seeing some of the videos of some of these other bucks these guys were stalking. And I started having shooter's remorse. I was like, oh, gosh, maybe I shot too early, too fast. because these guys were chasing some giants. I think there were 9
well, you've
guys.
Seen Diesel, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's huge.
Yeah.
There were 9 guys in camp, and we spent like 6 days there. And at the end of the week, I was the only one that shot a deer. So then all of a sudden I went from having shooter's remorse to like, oh, thank God I shot that deer, because and they're all good hunters. It's just so hard. Like everything has to go perfect,
I've never shot a mule deer. I fell in love with maybe 6-7 years ago with whitetail. I go out to Minnesota every year, and that was hard at first because I'm used to the Western spot and stock. And then I went to Minnesota because a friend invited me out there, and I've become friends with these guys. And, sitting in a tree stand for 3-4 hours in the morning and 3 or 4 hours at night. I know guys like Dudley are doing it all day. I'd kill myself if I had to do that all day. But man, I fell in love with whitetail, struggle. Man. They're incredible.
It really is. I've never hunted whitetail like that, like you like where you did. I grew up hunting whitetail as a junior high and high school kid with my bow, right out my parents' backyard. I'd go set a tree stand up, and I shot a couple of deer, but nothing big. But to be honest, I mean, I love it. I love big whitetail, but I'm the wrong kind of personality to sit in a tree stand. Like I have whitetail hunting back here behind my house, and again, I'd probably feel different about it if we had big bucks running around, but we don't.
Yeah.
But I sit there for an hour and I start thinking about all the shit I should be doing. I just can't. I'm like, God, I could have built that bench in my shop. I could have cleaned the floors. I could have made a half of a knife by now. My personality really, it's different. I think if I travel somewhere, because when you travel for hunting, you're just there to do that. But boy, when I'm a 10-minute walk from my house, my mind can't do it.
Yeah, I get it, man. When I start, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I was freezing my balls off, and it was just miserable, and I didn't see any deer, and I was like, what is going on? But I don't know. I got the bug. I'll have to show you. Last year, I shot the biggest buck of my life. I actually never found him. I spent hours trying to find this deer, and when the snow thawed and spring came, the guys I hunt with actually ended up finding him, and my arrow was just buried in his body cavity, and they sent it to me. I'll send you a picture.
Yeah,
oh my gosh. Like, yeah. So, I had the thing mounted. I'm like, I don't know. Should I mount it? Like I killed it for sure. I killed that deer. I feel a little bad because I didn't harvest it right away. I didn't get any meat from it, but little mixed feelings on that one.
Yeah. Well, at least you found it. I mean, that's good. A lot of times, that's the unfortunate part of hunting that we, we'll all go through. If you hunt enough, like everyone's going to go through that at one point or another.
Yeah. Well, you said something interesting, Josh. You were talking about making half a knife, and I can attest for that because I don't know if you remember this or not.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? I need to send this to you. I got a little rust on it. I've got a bloody, this is not a showpiece for me. This is a working piece, but this is the Stonewall.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it's the only Damascus Stonewall that has ever been created. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I've built a couple of those of Damascus.
You have?
Ones.
Okay.
I have. Yeah. But you're the only one that's built one with me. That's for sure.
This is a Josh Smith, Ryan Mickler collaboration that you will not find anywhere else. But I need to get some of that rust off because I put this thing to work, man.
Yeah,
building a knife with you was a highlight, quite honestly, that I will never forget. I loved doing this.
That was a blast. That was really fun. I'm glad you still got it, and I'm glad you're putting it to some use.
Well, that's the thing. This is like, people have trophies and things they want to put on the wall and put in glass boxes. A knife isn't designed to do that. A knife is designed to be used. That's not to say that there aren't showpieces for sure. And I know you create some, but man, this is a working piece, and I'm glad we could do this together.
Yeah, that's really cool. That had ironwood on it, I think, right? Does there ironwood?
Ironwood. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's I don't know if it's going to focus or not, but yeah, it's ironwood handle.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. Geez, it's amazing. What year was that? Was that
probably 21, I think, maybe 20, 21, 22, somewhere right in there. Yeah, I'm sure. 21 probably.
Feels like a decade ago. It's crazy.
Isn't it wild, man?
Flies.
You guys have grown so much, you know, and then I just got this knife, the V24 in the mail. I don't know, just a couple of, it was interesting because this is the one that I wanted. I think you call it Black and Coyote, and you guys sell out of knives so fast. I jumped on at like, I don't know, 708. You opened it at 7. I jumped on at 708. This was the only one that was left. This is actually the one I wanted. So
really, that's awesome.
Yeah,
those knives are pretty damn cool. I'm pretty happy with those. I'm really stoked with those. That whole
it's a throwback,
line,
right?
Yeah. That
I don't know if you guys can see this, but
that it was originally called a V42, made by Case, and it was it was a longer blade, and it was shaped a little bit different. It had a point on the pommel of that. I don't really love a point for a fighting knife on a handle because the handle's really pointing at you, especially airborne operations are a lot bigger deal now, obviously. And, if you've got that dagger with a point on that handle and something goes wrong on a jump and you end up folding in half or something, I don't want that point of that thing jabbing whoever's carrying it. But that V42 is a legendary knife. And what's cool about that is that knife was for the Devil's Brigade, which was the very first special operations group ever formed. And it was formed between some soldiers out of Fort Harrison here in Montana, and some soldiers out of Canada. And they came together, they called themselves the Devil's Brigade. And that became the very first special forces group. And so that's really where, Green Berets and, the unit guys and Navy SEALs, that's really where all of that kind of started, which was a smaller team of specialized guys. They called it a V42, which was victory for 1942. And you think about World War II.
Oh yeah.
And so we called this one the V24, for victory of 2024. And I shortened up the blade a little bit. I shortened up the handle, and I wanted to make it a little bit more practical to carry for our soldiers. The V42 is really cool, but it's just too long to actually reasonably carry on your kit.
Right.
And we're actually going to come out with a longer version probably next year, which will be cool. But they're a little bit more ceremonial than they are functional. They're very functional, but as far as carrying them, so anyway, I just thought it was cool. And it just so happened to be that the V42 was in 1942, but here we are in 2024. So we just reversed it and made it the V24, which was cool.
I didn't know where that came from, but that's actually really cool. And one thing I noticed on the actual, sheath is you've got this, I don't know what you call it, but it's this like everyday carry clip. It's not the one that you would put on like a hunting pack, for example.
Yeah.
But it's this EDC clip. What do you call that? Because I actually really like that.
Yeah, it's like an EDC pocket clip. And it really does lock down on whether it's a pocket or they're also made to go over molly webbing. That's kind of that's why the width of that is.
Oh, that's a good point. Because I'd want to put this on my kit if I'm doing a backwoods hunt. Like I'd want to have this right here, somewhere readily accessible. Yeah,
and so you could click that over the molly webbing. The one thing, the sheath making is a little bit hard on the tactical side because there's such variation. I'm not a veteran, so I'm not sitting here acting like I know what I'm talking about. But when I talk to a lot of these guys, there's 100 different ways these guys carry their knives and where they put them on their kit. And quite honestly, it can be mission specific, depending on what gear they need to carry. How heavily are they loaded out? Are they carrying radios or are they just carrying some mags? Are they going a little bit, skinnier on some of their gear? And so where they put those knives can change. And then some of these guys, it doesn't change, and they don't want to lose anything. So they'll zip tie everything to their kit. And so that's the other part of it. It's like, hey, if you want to zip tie it, that's fine. But we offer a lot of different sheath attachments, especially for that tactical side on our website, because it's almost impossible to just make something that everyone's going to like, so guys can kind of play with what they want to have for attachments.
I think that's cool because on this knife, again, the Damascus stone, while we did, you were gracious enough to make this go with it, and so obviously, that's something I'm going to carry and something I really appreciate, but this is something that can go on my hunting kit. That's cool. I actually watched a video the other day. Tim Kennedy had done a video on this, and I think I don't really know the story because I try not to get into too much drama, but I think there's been some accusations of stolen valor, which I think are very uncredible. But people were bagging on this because it wasn't the V42, and I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to be the V42. I think it's supposed to be a nod to the V42, but not the actual knife. Somebody's already made that knife. Why make the same one?
Yeah. And the reproduction world is, I learned this a long, long time ago as a custom knife maker. If you're going to reproduce a knife, like a historic knife, man, you better get that thing exactly right, because the historian people will pick you apart. I mean, to the nth degree. And anybody who has half a brain can see that clearly this is not a copy of the V42. It absolutely has design characteristics that make it, you can see the similarities for sure in blade shape and in handle shape. The original V42 had stacked leather that was the handle. And so that's actually why we did the milling around the handle we did, to kind of, basically a little nod or shout out to that stacked leather look originally. But yeah, obviously this is not an actual V42. I don't read any of those comments. I don't really care. As far as Tim and some of that, I actually watched the podcast that had those accusations that they kind of lobbed at Tim. To be honestly, full disclosure, I have not read his book. And then I saw Tim's response. And my stance is on that, two things. One, I don't know. I've never been to war. So ask somebody else when it comes to like what's, technically right or wrong with some of these stories. I do know I have several veterans, including a Green Beret, that work for me. One thing for sure, both of these guys that have been to war and both have been blown up will tell you is if 6 of us go out on mission and we come back and it's fairly kinetic, we're going to come back with 6 stories about what happened.
Of course.
And even if none of us are killed, even if none of us step on an IED or any of that stuff, it's still freaking war. It's traumatic, right? You have a chance of dying. You are killing people. You are shooting people in the face. It's a traumatic experience. Even if you are a high level operator and it all goes well, you're killing people. And so the version of the stories can vary a little bit. I do know that. And then lastly, I find it interesting as a civilian. I have never seen a community more hard on each other than the veteran community. I mean, man, those guys chew each other up. And I think sometimes maybe there's some things in Tim's book that were embellished. Who knows? Maybe there's a couple things that are just flat out not true. I know Tim actually very, very well. I've seen him behind the scenes with people. I've seen him when we met with President Trump, with Secret Service guys wanting to get pictures with him. I've seen him with the coffee gal at Starbucks. I've seen him, how he treats people at his workout classes with firemen. He is a good human. Oh, okay. So, yes. Do I think he willingly and outright lies about any of those stories? I really find that hard to believe. Also, you have to remember there's a ghostwriter for the book, right? And so, if I was to dictate to you, Ryan, my entire life story about making knives from the time I'm 11, and we sit down for the next 4 days and I just tell you my story start to finish, and then you go write my book, you may take some of your own liberties to make my story as an 11-year-old Little League baseball player sound better. You might even say I was the best baseball player on the team. I didn't tell you that. Right. And then somebody
Right.
might come out and say, well, I played with him. He really wasn't the best player. Right. Well, so I guess my point on this is I'm not sure. As a civilian, what I know is those guys are American heroes. He's a Green Beret who also fought in the UFC, which is either one of those is incredible to achieve individually. And then he went and did that. And then he also has done some super heroic things. I've actually seen videos personally of him working the southern border because he's still actually in the military today. I also know that book was run through the DOD and approved, and they fact check stories. So, it's a long-winded, but my point is the last thing I'm going to do is really pick apart an American hero, because I think all of those people are American heroes that served, and I didn't. So that's kind of my stance on it. And I take every individual relationship. There's some rivalries in this community of some very well-known people that I'm friends with that actually don't like each other at all. And I always take all my relationships based solely on my personal experience with that person. And my experience with Tim has been nothing short of, incredible.
Yeah. I would attest to that as well. I think you probably know Tim better than I do, but what I'm reminded of is A Few Good Men, when Jack Nicholson basically says, hey, look, you're asking me to protect it, then you're going to critique the way that I protect you so you can sleep at night peacefully in your bed. Look, we have a right to do that, and you can do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't. We ought to be critical of these things, but also we ought to take all of this stuff with a grain of salt. One of my favorite stories of Tim is I was supposed to do a podcast with him years and years ago. And I went to a friend's house, Kip Sorensen, and we watched some UFC fights. And I think he was fighting, what's the guy's name? Kevin Gastelum, I think is his name. And okay. Tim ended up getting beat up. And I already had an interview scheduled with him. And Tim got beat up. Kevin was on fire, man. And I remember thinking, well, there goes that interview, because I was supposed to interview him on like Tuesday or Wednesday after UFC. I'm like, well, there goes that interview. You know what? Tim showed up.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
He had a good conversation. I've been to his house. He's shown me interesting and unique things that he's told me stories. Man, the guy is solid. So, I attest to that as well.
Well, and there's, Tim is no doubt. Tim's a look at me guy, right? I mean, he's out there. He's out there for sure. And so you have a few guys out there like that. You've got Jocko, and you've got some of these guys that are big personalities and they're veterans, right? And so there's also kind of that veteran culture of the silent professional type as well that don't like that.
Sure.
Right. So I think that's going to draw some hate. Hell, I'm sure I've got some knife makers out there that maybe don't like me, that have never even met me, just because I'm kind of out there, right? And so I can't really do anything about that. I've been in awkward cases where I've had people explain or say things about me, either in a podcast or in articles, where they basically call me like, oh, Josh Smith, he is the best knife maker alive, right? Or the greatest knife maker, living today. They're trying to be polite and kind, but that's not true, right? And other knife makers might look at that and be like, oh, Josh thinks he's whatever. And it's like, no, I can name you a dozen knife makers off the top of my head right now that are better than me. I'm a pretty damn good knife maker, but there's a lot of dudes that are unbelievable knife makers. But it can be viewed as though I'm the guy saying that. And you can end up in some weird spots when you're public, like you and I are, where words are almost put in your own mouth, and you're left with people hating you, and you didn't even say it.
Well, it's not verifiable. That's an opinion. Like,
right.
How can you say somebody is the best knife maker? It's just not a category that exists, because it's all based on people's opinions, people's views, people's perceptions, people's experiences, or maybe their biases. It's not even a verifiable statistic, but I've had people say things like, well, that's just your opinion. Well, of course it's my opinion. Like, who else's opinion would I be sharing? I'm sharing my opinion. They're like, well, you didn't say it. I'm like, you're also not an idiot. You know the difference between opinion and fact. And I don't need to preface everything I say with, this is my opinion. You're capable of comprehending that idea.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, and that's the thing. I have taken more and more of the Rogan approach of not reading the comments, you know.
Yeah.
And the other part of that, to be honest, just from a time perspective, I started keeping track a little bit of one day a few months ago of just the time spent responding to some comments. And it's kind of mind boggling when you start multiplying that times 30 days a month. And it's actually a real struggle that I still try to figure out what that balance is, because I also have 99% of the comments on my pages are positive. And I never want someone to think that I don't care. Like if they comment and they're like, oh, I love that knife, or I love what you did there, or your company's awesome and, you know, it's inspiring. Well, if I don't get on there and say thank you and I just leave it blank, part of me just feels bad, right? It's like, well, I do appreciate all of those comments more than people know. And as you know, with social media and stuff, you actually want engagement like that. You need it. And so it's I find that not responding to the comments thing a bit of a challenge, because there's also just like, is that 10 or 15 minutes spent answering comments as important as talking to my daughter for 10 or 15 minutes, right? Because my daughter leaves at home for school in the morning, see her for a few minutes, then we're busy and whatnot. She's got basketball practice and then they head to bed about 8:30. I see my kids for about an hour out of the day, so should I spend that 15, 20 minutes answering comments, or should I sit and chat with my family? And I'm guilty of not making the right choice on that still too often.
I think more than anything, that just speaks to your character. Like, you're not just selling a knife. You actually care about the people who are buying your products. And I wish we could respond to it all. But the fact of the matter is, and the rate at which your company and organization are growing, it's just not possible. It's hard to know that somebody bought your knife and all you can give them is a thumbs up if they comment. Like, I definitely understand that.
Yeah, that's why we hired Brett. Brett's helping with that. On a drop night, Brett's in on the comments. Jess is in there. Brandon's in there. I jump in there. And we still can't answer everything. And it's, like you say, give them just a thumbs up. It's like, God, I want to be like, hey, I really do appreciate it. Thank you. That means a lot. But man, it's hard to keep up on all that. And, and then you combine that with answering texts, emails, direct messages, 3 or 4 different social media platforms. It just becomes a major challenge, and I'm not complaining at all about it. It's more about like, I'm still trying mentally to solve how to deal with it. But it's good. It's obviously good problems to have. I just went and visited our job site, and our concrete guys are pouring my concrete foundation today. It's 18 degrees and it's frosty, and their hands are freezing while they're troweling mud on the foundation. And I'm like, these guys are actually doing hard work. Like what the problems I'm trying to solve aren't actually that hard.
Yeah, but to be fair, and I'll stick up for you a little bit on this one. You're a lineman, right? So you're not unaccustomed to being out there in that freezing weather and doing the work. I think what a lot of people might see is, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, it is nice compared to what I was doing 5-10 years ago. You put in the work, man.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's why I have so much respect for what they do, because I sat out there plenty and froze my butt off, and especially this time of year in the mud, everything's harder coming into the fall and winter. when you're trying to do your job. Days are short. You don't have a lot of daylight, and you're just trying to get a lot of work done, and it's cold and muddy. And yeah, those guys they're doing a good job up there. That's the other thing. The weather 5 days ago said it was supposed to be like 45 degrees, and we were going to be able to pour and not have to cover everything. But then we got this inversion that came in, and it fogged in. The last 3 days have been solid fog. Our valley, I'll tell you what, we get fog that rolls in, and it'll be here for a week or two straight. And if you drive 20 miles east of here, it'll be a bluebird sunny day, and it'll be 50 degrees. And here it's like a low of 18 and a high of 22, and it's just fog. And that's what we're in. So those guys had to go rent ground heaters and buy a bunch of concrete tarps, and they're going to cover that whole foundation, run heat on it for the next 3 days to get to cure right.
I didn't even appreciate this until I moved to Maine several years ago, where, you'd complain about the roads not being done. I'm like, give these guys a break. They got 5 months to get it done. They've got 1/3 of the year to get it done. And people think, well, winter's over. Well, yeah, the ground's still frozen. So there's another couple of months. We don't, I'm in Southern Utah. It's mild. It's super easy. Yeah. Hot summers, very mild winters. Until you start moving north, you really don't understand what is happening here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different way of life. I mean, where I grew up just 100 miles east of here, my dad's excavation company, we would have to shut down mid-November and not pick up until the 1st of April, just because the ground froze so hard, so much snow. Which somebody might say, oh, you got the winter off. That's nice. And it's like, yeah, you also get to watch whatever money you had in your bank account just slowly drain out of the bathtub, and go down the drain. I think it was about 20 years. My parents went 20 winters borrowing money before they made it through a winter without having to borrow money to make it through. You work hard all summer, you save as much money up as possible, and then you watch it, and then come February, you're out of money and you're borrowing money to get going again in the spring. It's a challenging business in those kind of climates.
I think that's a relatively new concept. I mean, if you just look at nature, the squirrels and the chipmunks are stocking up during the spring and summer for winter because they know. And throughout human history, I think the majority of human history has been like that. It isn't until the relative ease of modernity that we've had the luxury of borrowing money or creating income 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's different.
I do have a question that I've been meaning to ask you for some time now. I've showed you a couple of knives, and we have two, almost opposite ends of the extreme, right? We've got something that's more of a custom made knife. And then over here, you have something that's more of I don't want to do it an injustice, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but more of a mass produced kind of knife, right? I mean, I don't know how you'd say that, but
yeah, it's a semi-production knife. Yeah.
Production knife. That's a good way to say it. What has been your internal struggle between creating something like this? And I know you've made knives for literally princes, and you've done some of these amazing things, and then you have more of a production knife. Do you have an internal dilemma? Like, is there a conflict there? And what does that look like for you?
I don't. And the reason why is because those two companies are named two different things, right? On your in your left hand, you have the Josh Smith knife, right? Or I guess, the Stonewall.
Ryan Mickler. Don't cut me out of that. Come on,
the
man.
Josh Smith, Ryan
Mickler collaborated knife.
Yeah. So that's the Josh Smith Knives custom knife, right? And then you have the Montana Knife Company knife. The place that it got weird for a lot of knife makers is when I'm looking you in the eye, Ryan, and I'm like, hey, this knife's $2,000. It's custom made, blah, blah, blah. And then, come to find out that custom maker has a CNC machine and has some automatic stuff. Right. And it's like, okay, where is this line of, and this is the age old argument that I'll refuse to get in with another knife maker because it's opinion. But what is handmade and what is production? Right. And handmade could be, you literally, smelt your own steel out of sand, because I've seen knife makers. I've been with I've done that with knife makers where you make your own steel out of iron ore. And then there's knife makers that have, hand file all their blades and go chop down their own tree, right? Like make their own screws. Like where does it stop, right? All of a sudden you use a belt grinder. It's like, oh, well, you're using powered equipment. And now you're onto a CNC mill. And so it's never ending, and everyone's opinion is different. For me personally, any knife that has a Josh Smith Knives logo on it, like I made that knife myself, without any help from anyone. The only caveat to that would be like if I gave it to an engraver to do like some custom engraving or gold inlay on it as like an embellishment. Now the Montana Knife Company knives, obviously I have employees. That dagger right there, I might have actually sharpened that. Like we get behind, or those guys down in my sharpening room really had to learn how to sharpen a dagger. And I spent a couple of days in there sharpening daggers with that crew, like tray after tray. So I still help now and then on that stuff. I still design all the stuff. I was just grinding a blade yesterday with a new model. We're coming out in January. To get the edge geometry the way I like it. I mean, hand ground that sample. And it's two different kinds of joy, right? The joy out of a custom made knife that you make by hand with very little power equipment, that's truly an art form. That's a different feeling when a customer or a collector buys that and it's several $1,000s versus some knives for MKC that we're going to make this week that are being made right now downstairs without me that I won't touch. But then I'll get a photo from some father with his 9-year-old boy with that kid holding that knife with a huge smile with a little spiked buck for his first deer. Two totally different kinds of joy, but equally fulfilling. I think the dilemma would come, and where it would lose its heart and soul for me is if I was sourcing things from overseas. I might not be doing all the work on these MKC knives right now, but the guy that's rolling that steel in Niagara, New York, his family also needs to eat, right? The guy running the laser machine, or a grinding machine, or Francesca, who's making the leather sheaths right down in Idaho, and her whole crew, they also have kids and house payments and, and their dreams of their own. So whether it's me doing it or one of my employees or a contractor that I have helping us keep up, it all feels just as good, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you've been really clear about is just you're authentic. Like, this is a Josh Smith knife and this is a Montana Knife Company knife, and you know exactly what you're getting. I think where I would make the distinction is, we put this, for example, when we sharpen this, it was with a belt sander. And you might say, well, that's not man-made, except for it is, because I was the one holding it on the belt sander and you said, that's not good. You got to redo that. You got to fix that. Right. Versus sending it all through a machine. And there's not anything wrong with sending it through a machine, as long as you clearly communicate what people are getting. And I like this thing just as much as I like this thing.
And that's the piece I've always said. If I'm at a knife show and we're custom knife makers, so long as the knife maker's honest about, hey, that inlay and all that fancy work on that handle, like I did that by hand with files, or hey, all that, I have the knowledge and I taught myself how to run a pantograph and a CNC lathe and a CNC mill. And I made all those pieces on all that equipment and I put that together. If the customer thinks that's cool and appreciates that for what that is, that customer should buy that, right? It's when a knife maker would maybe potentially lie. And I think there's very few out there that would do that. But there's still an art form to even learning how to run all that equipment and be good enough to produce something at a high level. Frankly, I have equipment in my own shop that I have machinists here that run it that I'm incredibly impressed by their skill to know how to run that machine and produce good parts off of it. So I've always said, I think knife makers need to not be ashamed of how they make their knives, no matter what form that's in. They just need to be honest about how they do it,
Yeah.
And then the customer can vote with his wallet.
Well, I love that point, voting with your wallet, because one thing you're doing is you're making everything in America. And there's a handful of companies, there's probably more. There's a handful that I know of personally where I have relationships with these organizations. You, Origin, Sorinex is another one. There's a handful of companies I know that are making everything in America. That's part of the story. And what's cool about it is when I buy a knife from you, not only do I get a cool product that I'm actually going to use, I get to support you and your friends and people that I've actually broken bread with and shaken their hand and seen where they work. Like, these are American, like putting Americans back to work. That to me is worth just as much as buying some other knife from somewhere else made in China or India or wherever they make knives these days.
That's the whole point of American manufacturing, right? And I've always, thought American manufacturing is cool. I've always supported it. I've always said, like, hey, we need to bring it back. But now that I'm in it and I get to see behind the scenes truly, like firsthand, how impactful, like what we are doing. And let's just take everyone out of my building out of the equation for a moment. How impactful what our company is doing around this country. Now, if you then expand that out to, let's say 1,000 more companies kicked off and did exactly what we're doing in their respective fields, whatever that is, that would spread across this country, and it makes our whole country more prosperous, more safe and secure. And makes our communities more tight knit, and it makes our country better. And that's the thing with American manufacturing. I don't care where it's happening, as long as it's happening in America. It's the impact it's incredible. I mean, we've given away this year alone almost $700,000 to nonprofits. In our fourth year of growing this company, I can guarantee you, if these knives were being made in China and I was receiving them in boxes and shipping them out, that we would not be doing that. That would not be the same business model. These companies in China, or a large investor-owned company with half the guys on the Chinese board or whatever, would not be giving away money to the Wild Sheep Foundation or the Montana Veteran Project, right? Or partnering up with some of these different people that we have to help support RMEF or, whatever, various organizations. We've really tried to spread it around. American manufacturing means more to this country than I think people know. And if we can continue bringing it back, it's going to make everything better.
Well, and I think one of the cool things I like is that these knives are made out of Frenchtown, Montana. Nobody knows where the hell Frenchtown, Montana is. The closest town, as far as I know, you correct me if I'm wrong, is Missoula, which I think most people would recognize. But Frenchtown, where the hell is that? And that's actually part of the story. We're putting real people to work here.
Yeah, and that's what's cool is I hope people get motivated to start businesses in tiny towns in Minnesota or in South Dakota or a tiny town in Utah. Like, people can grow. And this is what I told a high school graduating class. I was the commencement speaker there this spring. And I told them, our company should prove to you that no matter how small the town is that you're from, you can still do great things. You can grow a national brand in Drummond, Montana, that's the home of 1,500 people. It doesn't matter. That's the beautiful thing. I know a lot of people like to kind of crap on the internet and social media and whatever. And I look at social media exactly how I look at a gun. It can be deadly and dangerous and one of the worst things on the planet, or it can be an amazing, enjoyable tool that can also help you survive. And we have used social media in the right way, in the positive way, to build a brand to help feed these families and to build our American dream. And with the internet and with social media, I told those kids when I graduated, I said, I started making knives before there was the internet, right? I graduated before social media. I said, you guys have such a huge advantage because with the internet, the world is now, you now don't have to be in LA or New York. You can be in Frenchtown, Montana, and you can grow a major brand from right there, from your basement. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I had seen a post that you had made on social media, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and you had tongue in cheek said how tariffs and the broken supply chain will impact your guys' organization. And then I think the next slide said, newsflash, it won't, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on tariffs? Trump has talked about coming in and imposing tariffs on, Mexico and Canada at 100%, China for some things up to 20%. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I know just enough to be an opinionated asshole and not enough to actually have tons of fact behind it. But as just a regular guy watching the news, I'm all about it. What I would say, and I don't understand how this phrase can be taken as a bad thing, but they were actually using this in the campaign against Trump when they were saying, well, he's an America first guy. Well, yeah, no shit. He should be. He's the president of America. I'm the CEO of Montana Knife Company. I should be thinking Montana Knife Company first in that role, wearing that hat. Now, if it's my dad hat, then obviously I'm going to put my family first, right? And ultimately my dad hat's going to be worn all the time over any other hat. But as the president of the United States, it should be America first. Our senators, all of our representatives, everyone should be thinking America first. Now, that also doesn't have to mean, that we have to harm other countries to be first. But we should always be asking ourselves, is this what's best for our citizens? And hey, if our citizens are being crushed because, they're bringing in wheat at 2 cents on the dollar from another country and our wheat farmers are dying here, well, then we should probably put tariffs on wheat, right? And especially competition is really good until it's unfair, right? And so let's say Montana Knife Company, the Chinese version pops up and they start shipping in knives into America, but they're making knives at half price because they're paying slave labor prices. Then, yeah, the government should step in, and for the record, I'm actually a very small, limited government guy. But one of the roles of government is to protect its citizens against foreign adversaries. And that can be missiles and planes and ships, or that can be financial, in a financial way. So, I'm all for it so long as it's as long as, they've really analyzed the effects of, and you know what, some of us are going to have to be willing, not some of us, all of us are going to have to be willing to experience a little bit of hardship to make future better for our children. With our deficit and our debt and everything that we're doing, there's probably going to need to be some government programs cut. There's probably going to need to be some government programs cut that we would all agree are really great programs. I'm not advocating for cutting, school lunch for poor children, right? We all think that's a great thing, but there may be a program that's very similar to that we all agree is a really nice program, but at a certain point, we have to cut some programs and it should be on the community to help, whether it's feed those kids or, maybe it's after school childcare or it's, my argument would be we can pay for all that and just cut out the stupid crap, like sending money to Ukraine. Let's go ahead and feed poor kids in rural Montana and not send missiles to Ukraine. That would be a good start. Well,
I mean, even the one that comes to mind for me is I listened to something just today and don't quote me on the numbers, but 16% of the government in certain departments, the employees aren't even going to work. They're at home. So it's and that's fine. If that's more efficient, that's fine. But then we're spending billions and billions of dollars on heating and cooling government buildings that could be sold off, that could be turned off. There's billions of dollars. We don't need to worry about Ukraine or this or that, like, or these programs about feeding kids or Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. That's a quick and easy fix, right there. But I do agree with what you said about the fairness factor. If there's a bean and corn farmer in Minnesota and he's losing to a bean and corn farmer in Wisconsin because the guy in Wisconsin learned how to produce a yield that was 150% better than Minnesota, then he's got what's coming. But if you're stealing technology and you're rigging the game, that's the issue that I take issue with that.
Yeah. And it's, this is really what I feel about the government. And this is why people might consider me a little bit nutty, but until our government can pass a balanced budget, we should not be required to pay taxes anymore. And it's amazing to me because the IRS will tell you, Ryan, exactly where you went wrong in filing your tax return and penalize you.
They'll charge me
to whatever degree they need to. But they can't even pass a budget. Even if you said, hey, year one, you have to pass a budget and cut your deficit by 50%. And the following year, you have to cut it by 25 more percent. And the third year, it has to be balanced, meaning we are not going in debt anymore. Or the American citizens by year 3 will be income tax free. The government would get their ass in gear and they would figure it out.
Of course they would. Of course they would.
When you even have departments, the Department of Defense can't even run an audit on their books. They just tried, and they cannot audit their books. And so
7 years in a row.
As the as an American, patriot or whatever citizen, you should not be allowed to tax me until you can tell me what you're going to do with my dollars. That should be a very fair and easy thing to be able to, for all of us, right and left, to agree on. Like, I don't care how liberal and how left you are or how conservative, how right you are. Nobody should have to send $1 to the U.S. government until the government can tell you what they're going to do with your dollar. Because then you can make the decision whether or not you want to vote for them or not. Do you agree with what they're doing with your dollar or not?
But at least it ought to be accounted for.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, I'm staring down the throat of tens of thousands of dollars of penalties and interest because I underpaid. But you can be sure that if I overpaid any given quarter, I don't get to charge interest or penalties. And it comes to me on their convenient time, not their timetable, my timetable. It's horrible. I do have a question, though, about that when it comes to the company. Do you ever have concerns about being vocal about your political stance and beliefs when it comes to running a major organization and one that you actually want to have grow?
Yeah, that was a topic of discussion a bit through the election cycle. And I tried to just kind of think through whether or not it was either appropriate or if I should offer my political opinion throughout the year. Because Democrats buy knives too, is the famous Jordan line about Nikes. And it got to a point with me this summer where it was like, when I watched Tim Sheehy, who was running here in Montana for Senate, when I watched what him and his family personally were being put through by, and this is a former Navy SEAL, American hero, who decided to run. And when I watched the unfair attacks and what was happening, and then the final straw for me, where I'd already been offering my opinion a little, but where I went, absolutely screw it, I don't care what anybody says. When Trump took a bullet to the head, I thought, that guy's standing up and saying fight, and he's continuing to fight and continue to do rallies outside. how big of a pussy am I going to be if I can't stand up and just say who I want to vote for? And if it has ramifications on my business, then so be it. That would just shine a light on how bad of a situation that our country is in. And so that's kind of, now I also didn't hit the politic anvil with the hammer every single day, because to be quite honest, whether I agree with someone's opinions or not, I mean, it's everywhere, right? So I don't think our customers need to see it every single day. I think sometimes it's nice to have a reprieve and go listen to a podcast or go visit a website or an Instagram page and not being hit with the political hammer. But I did feel like it was important in a timely fashion throughout the election season to stand up and go, hey, this is what I believe. And if you disagree, that's great. If you disagree so much that you don't want to buy something from me, that's also fine. That's your absolute right. But I also think what I found is that it actually just deepened some people's love for what we're doing, and they respected. And I actually got some really nice messages. And frankly, I had a couple interesting dialogues back and forth of debating people who didn't agree with me in my DMs, but actually in a real respectful way, where those people still follow me today. I got a really nice message the other day from a guy that said, you and I do not agree politically, and we've had our disagreements, but damn, I'm proud of the company you've built and the way you're running your company. You know, that's an awesome compliment. Like, we don't agree on Trump or on a few certain things, but the guy's objective enough to realize that I'm also not a piece of shit. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, and you could have voted for Kamala, and maybe you had your reasons. Maybe it's on, you know, the right, you know, the women's rights or whatever, right? Whatever you perceive as your hot issue, you could have voted for Kamala and also not be a terrible person, right? We can sit next to each other at our daughter's volleyball game on a Saturday night and have a nice conversation and support our kids and be good neighbors, you know.
I think there's a little bit of awakening in that department. You know, 4, 5, 8 years ago, I think it was more contentious than it is today. And I think we're realizing that although we might not agree always politically, that doesn't make you a horrible person. Maybe misinformed. Maybe I don't agree with you. Maybe I'm misinformed. I don't know. But we're not horrible people. We're all trying to do what's right. And I'm glad you brought up Tim Sheehy too, because we've had Greg on the podcast with Little Belt Cattle Company. And,
yeah,
you know, I love to see and I know you guys are friends with them and had done some work together. Like, I love to see the resurgence of American manufacturing, American beef, American products, American knives. Like, this is what we need to be more competitive, not only for ourselves, but on the world stage as well. And to spread what I think is a pretty good way of life, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I say it doesn't always have to be on a giant scale. If you just had 100,000 more beef cattle ranchers copy what Greg at Little Belt's doing and try in their small community, try to be the source of beef and figure out a way to take that beef from your ranch and into your local restaurant. You know, if that model was copied all over the nation, if Montana Knife Company was copied in whatever various different industries need, you know, parts made. I don't care if it's pens. I don't care if it's, you know, calipers, whatever, make it here in America. And again, maybe it's a $1 million a year company. It's $500,000 a year, $10 million a year. It doesn't have to be $1 billion companies. What's going to save our country and make our country great are millions of $1 million companies versus one or two $10 billion companies, you know?
Yeah. Well, man, I love what you guys are up to. Obviously, I've been a big supporter of you and what you guys are doing. You've been a big supporter of what we're doing too. And so this has been a good partnership. What has it been? 5 years since we met? Maybe at Winter Strong with Bert and Sornex.
Were you at the Winter Strong in 2020? Were you there at the first one in 2020 or 2021?
No, second one, 2021. It must have been. I missed the first one, but I got an invite on the second one, so I think it was 2021. So we're fast approaching 4 years now.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, I really do appreciate your support, and your Iron Council guys and whatnot. I hear from them. It's been awesome. The support you guys have been. You were early to support us, and it means a lot, man. Appreciate it.
The only negative I've ever heard about you guys is, damn it, I can't get a knife. I'm trying to, but I can't get one. And you guys are solving some of those problems as well. But those are good problems to have, man. I really appreciate you. I'm looking forward to that opening of your new facility. I remember when you opened your previous one. It's crazy to think that that's outgrown now and you need something even bigger. I think I read that you spent $7,000 on foundational bolts or screws. I don't know. I'm not a construction guy, but I love to see that story, man.
Last week I was standing up there and they were, they're pouring today, but they were putting the bolts in, and my concrete guy goes, yeah, $7,000 laying there. And I'm like, in bolts? I'm like, God, it's so expensive to build. We'll have almost $1 million just in concrete in that place. It's absolutely insane. But again, good problems to have. The fact that we can buy $7,000 worth of bolts or $1 million in concrete just shows you how much support we've had from the American consumer over the last 4 years. So yeah, I really do appreciate it. And yeah, just start planning on it, man. I think about the end of March, which is what we did last time. The end of March of 2026, we should be having a pretty cool grand opening. So you might as well just block that month out, Ryan.
Just mark it out right now. And if you don't end up using any of those $7,000 worth of bolts, you can always melt it down and make a cool knife out of it or something. I don't know. But you got use for it for sure.
Probably could.
All right, man. Tell the guys where to connect with you, and we'll wrap it up for today.
Yeah. Our Montana Knife Company, Instagram, montanaknifecompany.com. And then, my personal page, you'll hear a little bit more about my political opinion, whether you like it or not, and maybe see a few pictures of my family. But just my @JoshSmithKnives is my Instagram. So I appreciate it, man.
We'll sync it all up. I love watching you and your family and your kids. I don't know how old your son is at this point. How old is he? What year of school is he in?
He's 16. He's a sophomore.
So he's a sophomore. Mine is a junior. My oldest is a junior. And so they're very close in age, but just to see him grow, and I love to see it, man. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and our connection, man. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Take care, brother.